think the opening session is one that certainly has created a lot of conversation, as often it does. So without further ado, I'd like to recognize Dan Empfield and Lance Armstrong. Come on up to the stage.
My old sponsor, Dan Empfield.
Yes. Okay. If you don't care, I'll sit here.
Okay. You can sit on the right. That's fine.
All right. I'm just going to draft you.
Good morning.
So Lance's here to interview me, and I hope you ask some good questions.
I'm used to interviewing people now, so.
Yeah, I know you are.
But I haven't done my research into your life quite enough.
Okay, so you're already anticipating my first few questions on this. I thought what we would do is we do a little Q&A. Some of you folks might not know what Lance's been up to lately. It's pretty interesting. So we'll talk about that, and then after we run through as much as we can and we sort of exhaust topics, then we'll take some questions from you guys as well. So first I want to talk about your podcast, because I think people, I don't know if they're surprised or not about how good these things are. And I'm not normally someone who is jealous of someone else. But I am so jealous of the people that you get on your podcasts. I cannot believe it. Now, can I say who's the last person you podcasted?
Sure.
Is that,
it's not up yet, but you can say.
Yeah. So I called up Lance and I said, okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the format, what we're going to do up here. He says, okay. Yeah. He says, I just finished my last podcast. I said, well, who was your last podcast? And he said, it's Neil deGrasse Tyson. And
it's amazing this guy's following. Do you guys know who Neil deGrasse Tyson is? Exactly. A lot of people don't, but the ones who do, I've never seen so many people so geeked out about. I mean, he came to the house to do it, and it was like there was like a line of people out there just to get it was.
Yeah, I mean,
he's an astrophysicist.
He's the rock star physicist.
Yeah.
He's the guy. If you see the big black guy on public TV explaining the cosmos to you, that's Neil deGrasse Tyson. And he's fascinating. Yeah. I mean, he goes on Bill Maher, and I mean, everybody wants this guy. I mean, he's an A-lister.
Stephen Colbert says it's his single favorite guest. So that's pretty cool.
I'm just, Douglas Brinkley. Mm-hmm. Okay, you guys, you turn on CNN and the other presidential historians, and this is one of the top 2 or 3, along with Doris Kearns Goodwin, and So Douglas Brinkley, Malcolm Gladwell. Now, at this point, if you get Michael Lewis, you now will have gotten everyone that I want to have dinner with before I die.
Full-on Empfield jealousy.
Full blown. So I guess it occurred to me that in the beginning that I want to find out who your booker is, and then the more I sort of investigated it, I realized you're the booker. These guys are all friends of yours. You just call these people up.
I don't think they're friends. I mean, it's thank you for the kind words. I mean, and if you haven't listened to it, then check it out or not. And if you have and like it, then thank you too. But it's just really random. I mean, I'll find these. Neil deGrasse Tyson, I get up every morning in Austin, I pour my cup of coffee and I read the newspaper. And I mean, this is I'm going to just tell you how I don't know Neil deGrasse Tyson. Most of these people I do know, so I just ask them to come on and they say, okay. So I see in the paper that he's speaking that night at the Long Center in Austin. And I thought, So I went to his Twitter account. He didn't follow me. And I looked, I thought, well, I wonder who he follows. So he follows 51 people. And I'm looking through the list, and one of the people I follow and follows me. So I think, okay, so I send this guy, Michael Shermer, a DM. I'm like, hey, dude, do you have Neil deGrasse Tyson's phone number? Immediately DMs me back, sends me the cell phone number. I start texting him. He's flying to Austin. I said, hey, will you come on the podcast? So this happens in the matter of like 90 minutes. And I'd never met the guy, and he said, I've got a window from 2 to 4. I said, great, let's do it at 2. And then, yeah, so it's sometimes it's really cosmic like that.
Okay.
And then other times it's just some homie that I'm like, hey, will you come on?
Now, we're talking about Michael Shermer, the ultra-distance cyclist.
So I didn't. He wrote me back when he gave me the number. He said I would love to come on the podcast because he told me he was the co-founder of RAM. I didn't know that.
What?
Yeah.
Whoa, who is the
That's what Michael Shermer said.
Michael, who's the that Shermer is? Or
Yes.
Yeah. So how does Neil deGrasse Tyson know Michael Shermer?
I didn't ask him that.
Huh, okay.
I wasn't really interested. Once I had him there, I didn't really care.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Shermer's big time in ultra cycling. You bet. He's before your time. He's my generation. So. But these podcasts of yours, you hang in there with these guys. You go toe to toe intellectually with these guys. You are right there with Brinkley on history.
But I'd spend a full day getting into their lives, and you guys, I say this from the perspective of knowing that people can look into my life and see literally everything, not just you guys, but my family, my children, my community. So you can do that with anybody. By the time you start with their Wikipedia page, then you get on YouTube, and then you start finding interesting interviews, and you just, I make notes, bullet points, and then you just use that as your outline. But these days, there are still some secrets out there, but very few.
But it's more than that. You're being a little humble about this because you get on there with Jason Isbell, and you're talking about Sturgill Simpson and Drive-By Truckers, and this guy produced that album, and this guy was a drummer.
But I like that stuff, so that's not a stretch for me. Like, I like Jason Isbell, I love Sturgill Simpson. These are people that by the way, I don't have anybody on that I don't want to talk to. So I already want to hear these stories. None of it's really a stretch. Sometimes guests are not that talkative, which you struggle with a little bit. Sometimes guests like Seal was very, very emotional and very dark, and I was in a place where I didn't know how to really handle that, but somehow he and I did the dance, and it came off great. But most of these, almost all of them, I want to talk to. It's like, this is...
Do you have a favorite so far?
Michael Morton's my favorite. Yeah, Michael Morton by far.
Huh.
Who nobody even knows who that is, but...
Okay. So who is he?
So Michael Morton he lived in Austin probably 30 years ago, and his wife was brutally murdered, of which he was accused of doing. Everybody set him up, the sheriff, the prosecutor, the coroner, the neighbors, the friends, the wife's family, and so he went to prison for 26 years until the Innocence Project took on his case, and DNA science obviously evolved over the years, so he was exonerated after 26 years, and so he doesn't live in Austin anymore, he lives in Tyler, Texas, which is just east of here. And the stuff he said was, if you want to listen, if you don't want to listen to the podcast, I totally understand. If you want to listen to one episode, listen to Michael Morton. It will literally change your life. His view on the people that put him away for 26 years, because he's very descriptive of what he wanted to do to them for about 15 years, and him talking. I mean descriptive. He had a plan for every one of them. One of them he was going to shoot and bury. One of them he was going to burn. One of them he was going to drown. He lays it all out, and then he finds God, and he's forgiven all of these people. But the interesting thing about finding God was that after about 16 years, he was given the chance to be pardoned. But in order to be pardoned, you have to confess. You have to show remorse. And he said, if I confess, obviously he didn't do it. He said, if I confess to get out of here, that would be a lie. And as a man of the Lord, I'm not going to lie to get out of here. So I'll spend the rest of my life here if I have to. Anyways, he gets out, and it's just, the guy's amazing. Really, really cool guy. You won't waste the hour with him.
So before we leave the podcast, I do want to ask you, though, about a couple in particular. And I was fascinated with Douglas Brinkley's because, for a bunch of reasons, but I think you met him through Sean Penn in accordance with what was going on at Katrina. Is that, do I have that right?
They met in New Orleans in and around Katrina because Penn throws himself into, I mean, he's now embedding himself with the Syrian force. I mean,
Right, yeah.
he goes to the weirdest places in the world.
So, but there's a several sort of one degree of separation thing going on here because Douglas Brinkley is named in Hunter Thompson's will as his official biographer when Douglas Brinkley gets around to it. You have,
and he's the custodian of his entire archive. So
Right.
he has, yeah.
but you have a Hunter Thompson intersection as well, and a Johnny Depp intersection, and so because I guess because you have your house in Aspen,
Yep.
and so
He was a real force in Aspen.
yeah,
And so he was before my time. He died in 2005, and I got there in 2008 or 2009. But it would have been cool to hang with Hunter.
Yeah,
By all accounts, we would have liked hanging with each other. But
yeah, I would say you guys are cut from the same cloth, but I just found it interesting that there's this sort of posse, and you're in it, and Brinkley's in it, and Johnny Depp's in it, and Sean Penn's in it, and so you could talk with Douglas Brinkley in a way that, you know, a CNN interviewer couldn't.
But I think it's interesting. These people, I mean, you look at a Brinkley, who's arguably the most influential or most important presidential historian today, or a Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's, you know, the astrophysicist. These people, society now, I mean, these people are stars, right? Douglas Brinkley is a star. He doesn't write books all day long. I mean, he spends most of the year traveling the world speaking. Neil deGrasse Tyson, I mean, he speaks at the Long Center when he came into town. 2,400 people, sold out in like a day. These people it's like Bob Dylan coming to town. So somehow and I think this is great. You know, in the day you were a musician or an actor or an athlete, but now you could be a rock star presidential historian or a rock star astrophysicist.
So how's this process changed you? You do these weekly. You've been doing them since earlier part, maybe second quarter 2016.
Early June. We started in June. Yeah.
So how are you different now as a result of having spoken to all these people on some, you know, political science, popular culture, I mean, heavy topics, big topics.
Yeah. I don't think the podcast I mean, it's educated me on a lot of things about these people's lives and what their lives have touched. But I think you have to go back, as we all, this is no secret to anybody in this room, you have to go, if the podcast is 6 months old, you have to go back 4 or 5 years to figure out, then talk about what change has happened, which has made the podcast possible, I think, or just those candid types of conversations possible. Because if I couldn't have done that type of platform or had that type of platform 5 years ago. So I look at, you know, my world went from, you know, from the stars all the way to the ground, seemingly overnight, and that was an interesting, tough process for me and my family. And so with that, all of the platforms that I had went away, whether it's triathlon or whether it's cycling or whether it's cancer or whether it's sport in general. And so that was a humbling experience, which gets me to my point, is that the podcast is the first platform. It's the first place you say, okay, here's my place, right? You can either come or not come. You can download it or not download it, but this is an offensive move. And so for the arc of my story, whatever it ends up being, it's just the first place that I've gone back to give people a place to come to. And I've been, honestly, my longtime manager asked me or told me for years that I should do this. I wasn't ready. Partly I didn't think I was ready to dive into the research, but I was also insecure about whether or not there'd be any downloads. So I've been like, this is great. We got all these cool people. Nobody downloaded it. But I've been blown away with the amount of quote unquote success that it's had.
So there's a couple podcasts that you did that to me start to sort of segue into sport And I know your podcasts are the next thing for you, looking forward. And they're not really related to cycling. But you can't take the neighborhood out of the boy. And when you and Malcolm Gladwell were talking, he's a former, very high-level youth runner.
Mm-hmm.
He is a run geek at heart.
It really is.
I got the sense that he really wants to do a triathlon. I mean, he didn't say it, but he voiced all the sorts of stuff I voiced when I was 22, right before I did.
Does everybody in the room know who Malcolm Gladwell is? Okay, good. Well, he now rides a bike because he's a little injured from running, which happens to most of us. He admitted on the podcast that he just can't swim. I guess the bigger issue is who's going to make the swim cap to get over that fro of his.
Yeah, well, there is that.
But I don't think he can't swim. But that's why he was. We had if you want to listen to Malcolm and to you can just put that. Thanks. We not debate, but we talk about what would happen if you changed the order of the triathlon. That's what he wanted to talk about. I had all these notes from Malcolm Gladwell, and he walked into my room and he started talking about triathlon and started talking about the order. Why is it swim, bike, run? Why? And I said, stop right there. Let's hit record and let's just start. Let's go. And so we started talking about changing the order of the triathlon. What would happen? Who would win? Would you have different winners? Would people drown if the swim was last? I mean, all of these things which are all true, I think.
Yeah, but I asked you this for a reason, because Malcolm Gladwell his brain is not attached to convention. And
you.
He is exactly the kind of person who ought to be thinking about where triathlon
Sure.
goes from here. And that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
He's never even done one. And he was already thinking about where does triathlon
Yeah, I don't even know why it came up, honestly. I mean, he just started talking about it when he walked in, and it was fascinating.
So
I don't know that there's a future in going, swim, run, bike, or maybe there is. I don't know. The next panel is about the future. Julia's doing the next panel about the future triathlon, so you guys can. I just don't think the swim should ever be last, unless you want to lose some people.
the first triathlon I ever did, the swim was last. But I will tell you that it was Cramp City, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Douglas Brinkley, you guys in the podcast talked about the corporatization of America. And I don't know if you remember this, but you asked him, what is the book that hasn't been written that needs to be written?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he said. He said that, these cultures, these small town cultures where a Walmart moves in and the banks move in and you can only pay with a credit card, and how that overwhelms the cultures and sort of squashes the cultures of small town America. And I wonder, my thought when I heard that is, I wonder what Lance thinks about the corporatization of mass endurance sports. And of course, I'm talking about Ironman, and I'm talking about competitor group, and without
All of
casting.
them. They're all big businesses now.
Yeah,
New York Roadrunners Clubs, huge business.
So do you think that, in the way that Douglas Brinkley seems to think that's a threat to the culture of America, do you think that is a threat to the culture of sport as we understand it?
Well, it depends on which sport. I don't, and I'm a little detached, not a little, I'm a lot detached from triathlon at the moment, or for now, or maybe forever. You hear, people are critical of Ironman and critical of Andrew Messick at times, but at the same time, you still have millions of people that are, busting their butt to paying a lot of money to play the game. And so, that's a mass participation event that anybody can enter. Then you look at cycling, for example, and you look at big corporation like ASO that owns the Tour de France, that is not a mass participation event. But I view that setup as much more evil than a Wanda Group or an Ironman or the Boston Marathon. I think they're two totally different beasts.
You're saying ASO is much more evil than Wanda Group?
Yeah, I think the grip and the hold they have on the sport of professional cycling is untenable. I think the business model of cycling, this is a triathlon conference, but I'll just say, the business model of professional cycling is 100 years old,
Right.
and it's not sustainable, and there's it's not shocking that there's turmoil there, but the tour, and to their I guess to their credit, they want to control as much of that as they can, but it really casts a shadow over so many other events, and the entire sport is beholden to them. The rider wants to get on the team that's dying to get into the tour, and the tour is too big, but as I can tell, as I can tell you, it's the one and only thing that people care about. However, I just wish. Well, I wish a lot of things for cycling, but I wish that there was that there were more players.
Sure.
And that the riders, the most important thing is I wish that the athletes, the stars of the show, I wish they had a bigger and bolder voice when it came to all the things in pro cycling.
You told Malcolm Gladwell, I don't know if you remember saying this, that swimming is your favorite sport. Do you remember that?
I do. I grew up swimming. That was my first love, my first big, my first serious sport.
So as you know, most of us here do triathlons, and I think that all of us, our first sport is like our first love, and it made me wonder, at the peak of your cycling career, if you had died and they would have performed an autopsy and they'd have cut you open, would they have found really swimmer in there first?
No. I have size 9.5 feet and I'm 5'10.5", so there was no future for me in swimming.
Sure, but I'm talking about just in your heart. I'll tell you, I'm a runner. I do triathlons, but I started as a runner.
Yeah.
And so when they cut me open, they'll find runner in there.
Yeah. Dan, I've never thought about that.
Oh.
I've never thought about what they would find inside of you, but I've never really thought. I've never thought about what they would find inside of me.
Okay, We Do. Let's talk about We Do.
Okay.
First of all, tell us all what it is and where it's going to the best that you can.
Before I try to make up real quickly what it is and where it's going, let me just tell you what it is, right? In the sense of We Do is an answer to a question, right? So, and the question is one that you guys probably face all the time when you tell your neighbor that you ran a 50-mile race, or you did an Ironman, or you cycled through Death Valley, or whatever, or even if it's just a workout. I did 100s on whatever. Most people in the world look at you like you're crazy, and they say, well, God, who wants to do that? Who would ever do that? And the answer to that always is We Do. And as a collective group in the endurance community, that's always our answer when somebody says, who wants to do that? Who's crazy enough to do that? And it's always We Do. And so, my idea, as it's slowly emerging, is just that was the brand. Now, what is it and what is it going to become? We're still, admittedly, the podcast is as cool as it's been and as successful as it's been. It's kind of distracted the trajectory or the launch of We Do. But, for me, I think there's space for other events or more events or extra events. I think in the endurance world, training is changing. Monitoring is changing, tracking is changing. So how that all comes together, whether it's, obviously we know the obvious things, GPS and Strava and power, we got it. But as wearables evolve and become more and more real and actually function, I think that is going to make the athlete better and smarter and more injury-free. I think the content side, this is better than anybody, the content side of endurance is really, you guys do a great job, but it's sort of all, cycling has their sites and running has their sites and Tri has you guys and a few other sites, so nobody's put that from the content side Nobody's put all of these endurance sports. By the way, too, it isn't just swimming, biking, running. It's, who would have thought that Joe DeSena would have, 20 years ago said, well, let's go run 9 miles and let's do some bunch of pull-ups and let's carry a log. And I mean, it's crazy that this OCR world has grown like it has. I mean, I say it's crazy. It's not crazy. It's inspiring. So I think you just never know what that next event is, and that's y'all's struggle, right? That's the struggle with triathlon. That's the struggle with OCR. Is how do you stay relevant? How do you keep people motivated? How do you not get them to burn out? Is this cyclical? I mean, I'm getting off this topic of WeDo for a second, but I did my first triathlon in 1984, I think. 84, turned pro in 87. And tries were huge. I mean, the biggest triathlon in the world was in Dallas, Texas, at Lake Levon, the President's Triathlon. And then you had this period where there was a real lull in the sport. And all the Bud Light series went away, and Ironman was a one-off event in Kona, and now it's back with a vengeance. But can that sustain itself? I don't know. So there's always for these type A motivated people that that you do business with. What are you going to give them in 10 years? What is that event? Is it a backwards triathlon? Is it an opposite? I don't know what it is. And so, and I don't have that crystal ball, but so WeDo for me is just, and again, it's another, as I mentioned about the podcast, it's a platform. I know that my world does not look like it looked in 2005. We all know that. And I know that it doesn't look like it looked in 2012. But I refuse to believe that when I look behind me to see who's lined up, that there's nobody in line. I think there's people there. And so I'm not making light of it. I mean, it's been a serious issue, which we can all talk about if you want. But, the idea that I create new platforms, be it a podcast, be it an endurance brand, was something that was appealing to me. And people will either come or not. And if the ones who come and are supportive, gratefully are forever grateful. And if people don't want to support, I totally understand that.
I'm going to throw out 3 or 4 just concepts or platforms or paradigms, and maybe you can riff off what you think, where you think our future is in endurance racing.
I have some ideas.
Good. Well,
Go ahead. You first.
one of the things that animates me, I think, is corporate tri. Going through the corporation and.
Explain it. What is corporate? You mean?
So here's what it means.
You mean Ironman?
No, I mean, for example.
Well, I mean, Visa doesn't have a triathlon.
Well.
Or Bank of America doesn't.
Yeah, but they have a bunch of employees, and that's what I'm talking
about.
about.
Got it. Okay.
I'm talking about like an HR initiative / health and wellness initiative / fundraising initiative. And triathlon nicely checks those boxes because not everybody can run. But, Mary is in a spin class at her gym, and Bob swam in high school, or, and so relays are sort of this forgotten thing in triathlon. That's the gateway drug. What I keep hearing is that millennials really want untimed events. We have folks out here that are involved in.
Why is that funny? Did I miss something? No, I mean, I'm serious. I
don't know.
They don't want untimed triathlons.
Yeah.
Oh, they do. See, I told you I'm detached.
Yeah, they don't want times and places. Furthermore, I got to thinking. So we have got some guys in here.
So they just want to finish.
Yeah, they just want to do it.
Okay.
We got some guys in here putting on swim runs. Have you seen the Otillo stuff?
I have.
Right?
I have.
And so these you have to do as partners. And it got me thinking about something that I hadn't really ever thought of. I've been doing triathlon since the 70s. I never thought of this. I can't do a triathlon with my wife because she's in her wave and I'm in my wave. And this partner thing got me thinking about that. We just have no capacity to do that. Mm-hmm. And so there's all these concepts of where we go from here, and I have no idea how many of them have any purchase. And I just, you're sort of on the cutting edge of popular culture more than I am. So what do you think about it?
I don't know. I don't have. I mean, I didn't know that people wanted untimed triathlons, but That's
Sorry
what
for you timers out there. I'm very sorry.
yeah,
for
all
that.
those chip companies just went out of business. At least you wouldn't have to wear that thing on your ankle. That was the.
Yes.
But like I said, I mean, who would have thought that Joe DeSena would have, or Tough Mudder? I mean, who would have thought that's right? I mean, so we just don't know, and it's pretty exciting. But
Come on, we're here to hear you tell us.
oh boy,
Right?
I don't have the answer. I don't.
So here's a little bit of a tough question. Now that you might be getting into the world of endurance events and endurance production stuff, now you're on the other side now. And as you know, because you read Slow Twitch from time to time, and you see the.
It's been a while, I have to say.
Well, come on.
I heard a little bit about your debate with a few of them after my presence here was announced.
Well, welcome back. You're welcome anytime. But our guys.
It's all good.
Our guys are sticklers for fair play. And, you know, when we think we find a course cutter, I mean, no, you haven't seen it until you've seen a twitch hunt. And, you know, if you cut a course, you end up on the front page of the New York Times.
No, I read that article. That was the fact that that's on the cover of, I believe it was the Sunday sports section. I mean, that's where they sort of save their most important long form pieces. It was a fascinating investigation that went on.
It was, yeah.
It's not a new idea, but it was a.
I spent a lot of time back and forth with Sarah Lyle, who wrote that piece. But it got so captivating to her, she got on a plane and she flew to Nowheresville in Western Canada, where this gal lived, where Julie Miller lived, to go knock on her door. But you know that fair play is a big thing. So in triathlon or whatever event that you might be producing, if there's a fair play issue that comes up, you know, here's this whole group of people that frequent the anti-aging clinics doing these races, and they're messing it up. What's your posture towards that?
You have, let's just put them all out there. You have just traditional doping. You have course cutting. You have the guy who I guess is doping, the person who goes to the anti-aging clinic. You have mechanical doping now with engines and bikes that there's a lot of talk about. So you're going to have, somebody's going to have a motor in their bike at some Ironman, I'm sure.
Probably already have.
Probably already have. That will never change. You do an obstacle course race. If you fail an obstacle, which I did one, and I failed, 20 obstacles or something, you have to do like 30 burpees. Well, it's an honor system, so how many people do 22 burpees, right? Most of them. So, right?
I can't do 22 burpees.
No, you don't, and I had to do 180 burpees. It was the worst, and I did 180, but you know that somebody, so that's a course cutter in a way. And that's there's no way around that.
Do you think that we just should look past that? That in an age where it's participation that matters, not your time, not your place. I mean, is that where we're going, and we ought to just chill, or because
just chilling is not an option.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't have a lot of credibility on this issue, admittedly. And so it's kind of funny, kind of not, but it's true. So, but for whatever reason, I get asked a lot about it. In fact, Neil deGrasse Tyson, after we did the podcast, he asked me to do a show. So he's doing this new show on National Geographic Channel, which he takes a scientific subject, or he takes a well-known person, and he talks about what they did for a living or what made them famous, and then they break it down scientifically. So this came up when we were filming his Nat Geo show about should we just chill when it comes to letting athletes do whatever, take whatever they should take. And I told him the same thing. I said, look, I'm probably not the right guy to ask, but my answer to that would be no, right? I mean, as remarkably ineffective and inefficient as the agencies, the anti-doping agencies are, you still have to have them, right? I mean, they spend, and I get a lot of grief for saying this, but the facts support it that we spend a lot of money to catch dopers, and we just don't catch that many. That's the reality. Now, it's a little surreal to be talking about a 2017 issue based on my history 20 years ago, but it's made me that guy, right? So I don't think, as a parent with kids that play sports, I don't think just chilling is a good option.
You're still in the middle of the whistleblower case, is that correct? I mean, not in the middle of it. But
Yeah, we're somewhere, I don't know where in the...
do you anticipate being freer to talk about all of this when that case is over?
It's interesting. I'm free to talk about it right now. However, if anybody's paid even, 2% of interest to this story, you know everything. There's nothing between investigation, grand juries, books, documentaries, interviews. There's, somebody was talking to me about writing a book the other day. And they said, their question was, is this a classic memoir where you write a sort of Tyler Hamilton-esque book where you tell on a lot of people, or you tell a lot of things and you talk about other people, and it's sort of this headline grabbing thing? Or is it a different kind of book? And the question was the doping program and culture more or less interesting than what's already out there? So in other words, was it even crazier than what you guys have all been told? Or was it less crazy? And I said, honestly, it was less crazy. And they said, okay, then their view is, then there's no point in talking about something that's less interesting than what we've already been told. And we don't need to get into what was said and used to sort of advertise this story. The fact of the matter is what we all know, right? Is that the culture existed, I participated, I was caught, but it was not as sexy as it seemed.
I was surprised.
That's a bad word, not sexy. That was a different word.
We know what you meant. I use the same turn of phrase. I was surprised at your response to Malcolm Gladwell's view that, in particular in swimming, that doping is just rife. It's got to be rife. And to those of you who didn't hear the podcast, Malcolm Gladwell comes from the world of running, and he says, oh, man, I'm sorry.
I'll finish it while he's answering his...
Hey, Junior Brown. He's a tech Austin guy.
That's like Giuliani. When he was running for president, he was talking to the NRA, and he pretended that his wife called him, and he answered and was like, yeah, honey, I'm here. Do y'all remember that? No. But who moderates a discussion and doesn't mute their phone? It's a better question.
I do not know, man.
I mean, let's forget
You're
all
right
this.
about that.
I mean, drugs in sport, course cutting, non-time tries. Who does? Let's talk about muting your. Just
Hey,
simple.
this is my first podcast.
But Malcolm Gladwell was convinced, because the times in swimming have come down so much so quickly that that they were doping, and I said I don't believe that, but
you had, it was interesting because he says, in running, man, you set a world record, that's it for 10 years. It's going to be a while before someone breaks that thing. Swimming, you jump in the pool, you set a world record. I mean, come on, this boggles the mind. And we've caught up to the fabric suit times, and now we're past it. And you deconstructed and explained to him why the world records are happening now. You explained to him that when Michael Phelps turns, instead of just dolphin kicking back, he dolphin kicks down under the wave coming towards him. And it's because of the new sort of strategies of how you execute the swim. So I think a lot of people might have thought, I frankly thought, that you might just be bitter and say, damn right, they're all doping.
Right.
But you said, you know what, we didn't have out-of-competition testing back then. My guess is they're not. And that's what you said.
Yeah. My guess is they're not. Yeah.
I found that.
I don't think Michael takes anything. I mean, Michael Phelps. I don't think he takes anything.
Yeah.
But
Interesting.
I could be wrong. But I don't want to believe that he does. Some of you guys think he does. I don't know. I don't know. I sort of, those things, the Olympics, I sit back and watch and I cheer for Michael Phelps. That's my view.
Well, I got to return this call, so I'm pretty much done. That's all I have.
By the way, who was calling?
It's probably my wife. We're having a big rainstorm out there right now, and she's probably freaking out because we can't feed the horses because the hay's wet. And it's going to be something like that. So how about some questions from the audience? Here's your shot.
Now, are you allowed to participate in triathlon now? I don't quite understand the cycling ban goes forever, but in terms of the other sports,
Yep.
what are you allowed to do?
It's a good question. The code says that any athlete given a lifetime ban after 4 years that the ban started, they can participate in any other sport aside from the one that they were banned from. So long as, and then you get to the fine print, so long as the event is not, it's not for an Olympic medal, a world championship medal, or that the event is not an international event, which is sort of gray. So then you go to the promoter or the organizer and say, okay, well, is your event, I mean, is the Lake Lavon Triathlon, is that an international event? It's up to the organizer. If he says, no, we're the Lake Lavon Triathlon, it's a local event, then I can do that. Now, Andrew Messick took the position right away that every Ironman event is an international event. That was his position. So that, if you go into the letter of the law, then the answer is no. But for me, I mean, if Andrew Messick said, no, well, these are all just sort of local events, and perhaps Kona falls under that international championship or world championship. For me, if you said you can go race, Ironman France or Ironman Texas, I would do that. But if you said any other triathlon outside of that, I just couldn't motivate myself to do that. So I could go do the Kerrville Triathlon outside of Boston. I could do that. But that's just not quite as motivating.
It's not sexy enough.
Well, it's just, I had a dream. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I mean, when I did tries for 6 months in 2012, it was tough to figure out. It took me a few races to figure out the nutrition and the hydration and everything in and around triathlon again. And I was in France, about to, a week away from Ironman France. I was loving that. And then that was, for obvious reasons, that was taken away, and that was a real disappointment for me. But because my dream was to win in France, and then qualify for Kona and win Kona. I was 41 years old at the time. Now I'm, pushing 46. So even dreams of winning anything in my life are finished now. So yeah, it just didn't happen.
It's a great run course at the new one.
Oh, it is?
You could win.
And now I'm injured. I can't. I ran a lot for 2 years, and then I got my psoas was all messed up, and so I stopped running. And now I'm back. I'm back on the bike.
One of the most interesting interviewers today, no one would have ever thought they were, is Howard Stern. He's probably the best person out there right now. And I wanted to know if you thought of yourself, I think what's great about America is regardless of what has happened, positive, negative, you always have an opportunity to do something different, to follow something that you thought, you know what, I think I can do this. I mean, that's how I'm. Do you foresee yourself as being one of those people that would be able to interview anyone because you've been on the other side of that, you have been grilled to no end, you've been completely exposed, and that person might be able to open up to you because you've been there, done that, and you're qualified to ask them whatever question that may be. You foresee yourself as taking your podcast, kind of just taking it as it goes and seeing kind of what happens.
Yep.
See that for your future?
Well, three things. Number one, in 2017 and forever going forward, Howard Stern is on Sirius XM. If I went to Sirius XM and said, hey, can I have a radio show, they would say no. If I went to CBS and said, can I have a TV show, they would say no. But in 2017 and forever now, looking forward, we can create our own channels, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or iTunes or Amazon. I mean, you just, not Amazon, but you have these Twitter. We are the producers of the show. We are the content of the show, and we can broadcast it on our own. So you don't need a Sirius XM, and you don't need one of the big three networks or cable or any of these things. So that's a plus. On to talking to people. One thing I should confess is I tell everybody that comes on the show, first thing I ask them is anything we can't or don't want to talk about. And most people, almost everybody said, no, we can talk about whatever, but I want to be, like Seal, for example. I didn't want to talk to him. He didn't ask me not to talk about it, but I didn't want to talk to him about Heidi Klum. I didn't want to talk to him about the scars on his face. Everybody talks about that. Let's talk about something else. So I try to give people the security of knowing that I'm not going to be, I don't have something in my pocket that I'm going to hit them with hard. I've been that guy, and it's not fun. There might come a time where I have a guest on where you have to be tough on them, but for now, I'd rather talk about different things. And so I think the most common feedback I've had is that people are surprised at how open and honest and raw these people are, and they wonder why. And then they get to this idea, well, they're raw and open and really emotional with him because they see him as this flawed guy that's been through a lot, and it's a safe place for them. And so I guess in that sense, that works out in my favor. Again, sometimes I'm not, the Seal story, again, to use that, I mean, he's talking about the brutality that he faced growing up from his biological father. I mean, it was so gnarly. If you didn't listen to it, you should check it out. But it goes for 2 hours. But for about 30 minutes, he is very vivid and descriptive and detailed about the beatings that he took. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, I'm like a washed up, I can't get out of here. I'm stuck. And, but it was, nobody's ever heard Seal say stuff like that. Or there are other people that say really raw emotional things, which for me, it's a buzz. When we wrap up and the recording's over, I leave and I'm like, wow, that was intense.
Who do you want to interview for a podcast that you don't have yet?
Well, I'm going to Seattle tonight, right when you and I are done, Dan, and I was close. I'll admit it. I wanted to have Amanda Knox on, but we went back and forth, and she said, I'm going to pass for now. And I said to myself, when I asked her, I was like, why would she do it anyways? But I still tried. I don't know if you guys know who Amanda Knox is, but that kind of story so I really wanted somebody like Amanda Knox.
Interesting, the people that you are interested in interviewing, they're not sports people.
Some of them are sports people.
Well, I mean, you've done Bo Jackson,
yeah.
I mean, but
Bo Jackson has his Bo Jackson stories. Bo Jackson is not simply a guy who hit home runs and scored touchdowns. I mean, if you've seen his 30 for 30 on ESPN, I mean, this is a very interesting guy who doesn't do a lot, doesn't talk a lot, doesn't do a lot of interviews. So if you can get that, I mean, in the stuff he said, it was just, I mean, those are the ones where you do an hour and you want to do 9 more hours. I mean, you just want them to keep going.
do you anticipate at some point asking these guys, just putting it out there, I have this athletic event, I'm participating, I want you to do a relay leg, I want you to do a triathlon. I mean, is there any intersection at all between these two worlds of yours?
Could be, yeah, there could be. I mean, look, like another friend of mine who I would love to have on, I will at some point, is Brett Favre. Here's a guy who's fallen hard for triathlon, loves endurance sports. I look at Strava yesterday, he ran 10 miles. Brett Favre, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, ran 10 miles. I texted him, I was like, dude, did you just run 10 miles? He ran 9-minute miles for 10 miles. And he says, yeah, brother, I got a half marathon next week.
Oh, that's great.
So, you could put him on a relay. He did a triathlon in Key West last year. Yeah, he did.
I didn't know that.
He did a sprint triathlon in Key West. He said he cramped in the swim, he said.
Do you know who America Ferrara is?
Nope.
Okay, she was a Ugly Betty actress. I think she won an Emmy. And she was a big Hillary Clinton supporter during the election and big Latina voting supporter and all that. She did a triathlon. Anybody saw her op-ed in the New York Times? Yeah. It was unbelievable. Huh. I cried she did her first triathlon. And
she wrote an op-ed about
she wrote an op-ed.
Oh, wow.
First of all, you have to read that up.
Okay, and secondly-
all of you guys, and second,
Need to have
that's
her
the
on.
one I want you to get.
Okay.
That's
What happened to the crowd asking questions, Dan?
Okay, I'm sorry. Here we go.
Which, Dan, he's the phone, he didn't take his Adderall this morning.
Can you tell us more about your plans for We Do and how we can get involved?
Like I said, maybe I hedged and hesitated just because it's been so, what we know is we did our first mountain bike event last summer in Aspen, which was interesting because in Aspen, Colorado, there's a lot of permitting and a lot of permission that you need to get. And, I wanted something that was similar to Leadville, but not 100 miles. And I missed the Forest Service deadline, February 15th. So all I could do was have 75 people, and I couldn't charge. So we had a 75-person event that was free, which is obviously not a great business model. In fact, it was a money loser because we had T-shirts and we had a party at my house, but that event will continue on 2017. We're doing another century, and I prefer to call them centuries as opposed to fun. This is an interesting thing that we can talk about, but we're doing a century in Fredericksburg, Texas, May 13th. So just starting to build out the event side, and then obviously slowly build out the content side. The training piece, I'm interested in the training part of it because look at triathlon. You have the purple patches and the endurance nations and the CTSs of the world. To me, CTS is a complete dinosaur, right? You have something that makes $0 and 0 cents every year because every penny they make, they have to pay. This huge overhead with coaches. Something like Endurance Nation is a little more compelling. You have small staff. You have, I don't know how many athletes you have under there, and you have sort of a basic training plan sold for, not, $1,000 or $1,500. You could see how that could scale. But does training get smarter, right? Is there an app, or is We Do an app? And again, I'm just riffing with you. As you can tell, I don't totally have the answer. But is it a way that, for most people that want to participate, right? Is it empowered through artificial intelligence, and you have, when you sign up, you tell them your age and your basic things about you, the athlete, your best performances, and then the training plan comes back. You can communicate with the plan or with the app, and it changes, right? We know that things change. We know that people get sick. We know that people get injured. We know that their dog dies and they didn't train, so they didn't fulfill the plan. But is there a way that's way more efficient for the bulk of the people that do your sport? I think there is. If you look on iTunes, one of the top 10 apps is this thing called the 7-Minute Workout. Have you seen this thing, the 7-Minute Workout? It's been there for a year. It is a joke, right? So could the endurance world have something like that? If I had a magic wand, I would say that. Also, too, for me, one of my heroes, and from the business side, he's done an amazing job, is Jimmy Buffett. Right? So you look at Jimmy Buffett and you look at Margaritaville, he owns everything. If you're a Jimmy Buffett fan and you're going to his concert that night, he is making money off you from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed. You're listening to his station, you're buying his beer, you go to you go tailgate, you buy the T-shirt, you buy more beer, you buy the blender. It's just, then you get inside and it just keeps going. So, I really respect what he's done with his brand. But I want to say something about the event in Fredericksburg because, and this goes to your point of triathlons or events that are not timed. There was a quote-unquote, there was a Grand Fondo in Central Texas in Fredericksburg for a couple of years. And I didn't realize this till the other day, but Fondos are actual races. They're timed events. People want a time. They compete. And they left things not so good there. And so I had a long call with the sheriff last week, the sheriff of Gillespie County, and he said, "Is this a timed event?" And I said, "No, this is just a century. This is people, whether you're riding for charity or whether you're just coming out to ride in the beautiful hill country." And he said, "Good, because if it's a timed event, I won't sign off on it. Because with a timed event, you have people, they get to a red light, they run the red light, they run the stop sign, there's conflict." That was the first time I had heard that. Today was the second time I've heard it. But it was interesting, and we had to guarantee him that this was just a mass participation event. So, long story there, but You know, I think it's coming together in and around that. And then finally, the content side. I think there's a lot of your athletes that do your events have inspirational stories. And I think that those stories might get told, you know, amongst their tri club or their community or their master swim team, but they don't really get broadcast to the world. I think there's a way to highlight some of those. And then also just on the instructional side or the review side or the technology side, there's a way to pull all that together.
Let's do one more question.
That was it. We didn't even have any really gnarly, bad, aggressive questions.
Anybody got a gnarly bad? Anybody got a sexy question?
Earlier, you said that you wanted pros in cycling to have a bigger voice, and it seemed to give the impression that you thought it was less equal than triathlon. I guess my question is, as from the outside, as a
Wait, I'm sorry. I don't want to miss it there. What was less cycling?
something about that cycling was more evil. Essentially, you
Yeah.
saw triathlon as less evil than cycling because anyone could go and do it, and that you wanted pros. The one thing you wanted was pros to have a bigger voice in their, I guess, maybe their destiny in cycling. It doesn't seem, but in reality, it seems to me that cycling pros, it's more lucrative to them than triathlon pros. So looking at,
No doubt.
looking at
Way more lucrative.
looking at what they have and your perception from the outside, I guess, a little bit that there's a bigger voice maybe in triathlon. What could the industry do commercially to really support our pros differently or give them a voice or make it different for them, be more inclusive? It seems that they don't really. There's been some movements by pros to do some
Yep.
different things. They don't really seem to have a voice either. But what, from someone who's been successful commercially competing as a pro, realistically, what can we do as organizers?
We do. See, you said it. Sorry. No, I hear what you're saying. I think I can speak to it just a little because I did that 6-month stint. I mean, forget the tries I did in 87, 88, 89, and 90. But that stint I did in 2012, and was viewed, you know, I was a professional triathlete, but I was also the guy that won the Tour de France 7 times. So I was different, but I viewed myself as the same as you know, all the other guys that were on the start line. And, you know, my entry was not, you know, it wasn't totally positive. People had questions about my past, or they thought that it would overshadow their accomplishments. So I got the sense of what they're thinking and what frustrates them about being a professional triathlete. Yes, they make, I mean, what is a high-end, or what does Jan Frodeno make? He might make a few $100,000 a year, is my guess. I mean, you know how many guys in the European peloton make a few $100,000 a year? A lot. But you have an event that's very successful, or mostly successful on television. That it's a competitive event that people are watching those guys, right? So the Ironman, I don't know the numbers that the Ironman pulls on, you know, when it airs in October or when it airs later in the year. But it's, and by the way too, and I'll just be very frank, and I can't read his mind, but I don't think Andrew Messick or the Wanda Group necessarily really cares what Jan Frodeno thinks. I really don't. I think they want, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble here. I'm guessing, I'm making the leap. I think I'm close to right. I think they care what, you know, Betty Jo from Minneapolis thinks when she signed up for the half Ironman in Haines City. I mean, that's what they care about. And that's exactly what frustrates the professionals. You know, they want better prize money, they want better exposure, and that's where I was, you know, that's the only thing I could say to them. Like, I raced in Haines City. I can tell you something, there's not been that many people in Haines City for a half Ironman in a long time. And so I was like, guys, I know you're a little skeptical, but let's ride along here because there's gonna be a lot of people paying attention to this, and I want all of the ships to rise. And, but I don't think these, I don't know. I don't have a solution. I don't know whether, you know, what a union could do, or what. I certainly know what a union could do in the sport of professional cycling. I don't know what would happen if, you know, a whole bunch of pro triathletes came together. Did I get close? No, I didn't. You don't know. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
One more. We got final question.
No pressure.
So, yeah. So, a little bit, you wanted to stick with one. So, with the, you said you have no credibility when it comes to the doping question. I'd argue the complete opposite and say that you're probably one of the
Right, what was that movie, the DiCaprio movie? Yeah, it's, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I haven't been asked to be the spokesperson or the example that they trot out at speeches in high school gymnasiums, because they do that. But it's, Catch Me If You Can with DiCaprio, right? He was, we all know that story. It was a great movie. For me the issue of doping in sport in 2017 compared to cycling in the late 90s and early 2000s is so totally different. So I don't know that I can speak to it. First of all, I don't know. I'm so far removed that I don't know what is going on, whether there's doping or whether there's motors and bikes or what. I have no idea. It's the way this story unfolded. People ran so far and so fast away that I lost contact. So I can't speak to it. When I say I don't have credibility, I say that when people ask me, well, should we just not test athletes? That's when I say, well, I'm not the right guy to ask. If you're asking me, the parent, I say you absolutely test them. If you're asking me as me being me, I don't know that people really give a shit what I think about that. But it's when this separation happened and I was just put on the island, I mean, I just can't tell you. And so, if I had some kid that I ride with a lot of young kids and pros. If they ask me about it, which they never have, fortunately, and I think that's the thing is, fortunately, at least from the cycling side, I think that sport's cleaned itself up. I think there's been a more than anything, there's been this almost stigma around it because of what happened with me. But if some kid came to me, I would absolutely say, this day and age, there's not. I hedge because I worry that if tomorrow, let's take EPO for example, if tomorrow some scientist or some pharmaceutical came up with ABC, I'm making that up, it's a new compound, totally undetectable, relatively safe, 10% improvement. I worry what the endurance world would do with ABC. And so that's where you have to, then it gets deeper. Do these agencies work hand in hand with Big Pharma? It's just tricky. But that was the thing we were faced with, right? The 10%er came along, and we're like, wow. And you wait, and then you don't wait anymore. And then, but that's, and I'll wrap up here. But that's not, as far as I'm concerned, that's not, that bothered people that I did that, and I speak to this a lot, but that wasn't the thing that really bothered them. I think at this point, 4 or 5 years later, people have perspective on the story. They're like, all right, I don't like it. I don't like that he did it. I don't like that his team did it. But I'm looking around, it looks like almost everybody, if not everybody, did it. So, okay. But the way he took it a step farther, the way he treated people, the way he went after people, just this dug-in, hard-headed, mean approach, that's what really bugged people. And so that's the walk that I get to. I'd rather walk that walk than, I don't know that I have, I'm trying to answer your question, but I don't know that that's my walk. But the way that I treated others, the way that if my son treated somebody that way, I'd be embarrassed, I'd be pissed, he'd be in trouble. Like the way that, so that's the walk that I walk now. And so
I'm going to exercise interviewer's prerogative. I'm going to ask one more short question. We'll do 30 seconds on this maybe. Interesting thing about your podcast, when I go on iTunes and I look at the reviews, and it's 1 through 5. 1 is I hate it, 5 is I love it. And interesting thing about you, there's no 2s, 3s, or 4s. There's 1s and 5s.
Yeah.
And I wonder.
So it's a 2.5.
Yeah, but see, I wonder, to me, I felt like that was sort of a metaphor for how people view you, and I wonder if you wish that more people would view you as a 3 instead of a 1 or a 5.
Yeah, but that's not the way it is. And it never will be. People are either firmly against, firmly in support, and there's some in flux. So I'm detached, and I accept that they're totally against me, and I understand that. I don't get mad about it. 10 years ago, I got so mad about stuff like that. It bugged the shit out of me. I look at that now, I'm like, I got it. You think I'm an asshole? I got it. And I was an asshole for a very long time. And I can still probably be an asshole from time to time. But I understand that. And so I'm not going to fight that. What I'm going to focus on is I'm going to focus on the people that are still there and the people that are perhaps coming back. And, you know, it's not a campaign. You know, I get accused all the time. It's a campaign. It's not a campaign. It's just me walking my walk as the person that's lived the last, 45 years, and especially the last 5 years. And it's, from my view, it's totally authentic. And so, but I get it, dude. It's what we call polarizing. And, but it's
Thank you.
interesting.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance Armstrong. Thank you, Dan Empfield. Great start to the day. We're going to shift right into our